Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Jerusalem, Israel, and we continue with Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. We are in chapter 48. This one is a long chapter. I can tell you many different topics. We're in 48c. So let's start by saying some Tehillim, 117. Say it with me if you can in the Hebrew. Hallelu et Adonai, kol goim, shabechuhu kol haumim, ki gavar alenu chasdo, ve'emet Adonai leolam. Hallelujah. This one is called God's Daughter. Rabbi Yanai says, Egypt only subjugated Israel to hard labor for but a single hour of the days of the Holy One, blessed be He. What does this mean? So if you understand this concept that we're about to explain, it'll give you the tools to be able to calculate some of the workings of the sages regarding all these timelines. The Vilna Gaon discussed it plenty of times. In fact, I don't recall if we discussed it, but I know that I read it maybe in the End from the Beginning series. He goes by these timelines. So this is how it works, all right? The point of origin of this is Psalms 90 verse 4, where it says, "For 1,000 years are in your eyes like yesterday which passed, and a watch in the night." Okay? Ki elef shanim be'enecha keyom etmol ki yavo va'ashmura balayla. So we see day, we see night. 1,000 years for 1,000 years for us is like one for God, right? So we also know this from God's 6 days of creation, corresponding with our 6,000 years of reality as we know it. But it can get a little bit tricky because we know that there is a 24-hour day consisting of both day and night, each one spanning 12 hours. But in most cases, when it says yom, day, it refers to only the 12 hours of light as opposed to the laila, which is the 12 hours of night. So how much is 1 hour of the days of God? The equivalent of that, right? So if one full 24-hour day is 1,000 years, you divide 1,000 by 24, right? And then you get 41.66666666. In order to follow the sages, since if their works are translated in English, you will most likely miss it. Not most likely, you will absolutely miss it. You would just divide the 1,000 years by 12, okay? That's how you get the 12 hours, meaning where it says a day, only a day, that's 12 hours. 1,000 divided by 12, where you get 83.333333, okay? So how do we know? If the text only says day, yom, or if it only says laila, night, then you know it refers to those 12 hours. That's how you know if it's a 12 or it's a 24. Well, here's how you know if it's a 24. If it says yom echad, yom is day, but one day or day one, right? Then you know it refers to both day and night, giving you the 24 hours. This we get from Genesis, where the first time we'd see it is Genesis 1:5. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and it was evening, and it was morning, one day, or day one, Yom Echad. So we have the darkness, we have the light, we have the separation, right? We got 12 and 12, that is one day. So Yom Echad is 24 hours. Where it says Yom, it is only 12. Where it says Laila, it is only 12. Get it? Okay, if not, just rewatch this again. But that's basically how you do this math. Now going back to our text where it says, but a single hour of the days, sha'a achat miyomo, of the days of, rather, literally translates 1 hour of his day, of God's day, miyomo, from his day. Then you should understand what comes next as we continue to read from our text. And that rhymes. It was 83 1/3 years until Moses was born. So there we go. There's that one day, right? Meaning one day, only the light. Why? Because we have the 12 hours right here. By the way, just another fun fact. You guys are going to enjoy this. And I believe we discussed this before. But if you take the 12 hours of the 6 days of creation, which there are several opinions of what happened on which hour, and you count the hours by 83.333 years each, you'll have a better idea of the time of the redemption, especially since we only have 215 years until the end of the 6,000th year, right? Corresponding with a little over 2.5 hours, the equivalent of, right? I'll give you an example. According to Seder Hadorot, because there's Seder Hadorot, there's Avot Rabbi Natan, there is, even in Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, we discuss this. What happened on every hour of the 6th day that God did with Adam, right? So according to this one specifically, Seder Hadorot, on the 9th hour of the day, remember the day, we're talking about only the 12 hours. On the 9th hour of the day, Adam was given the instructions. Up until then, you'll see God did this with Adam and that with Adam and that. And here Adam was, he received the soul, and here he was with the animals, da-da-da-da-da. But at the 9th hour of the day, after he was placed in the Garden of Eden, God gave him the instructions, right? Do this, don't do that, keep it, guard it, eat from that, don't eat from that, and so on. He received instruction, right? That's the 9th hour. On the 10th hour, he sinned. On the 11th hour, he was judged. And on the 12th hour, he was expelled out of the Garden of Eden, becoming into this fallen reality, false physical reality. And then when he entered here, it was already Shabbat. And that's essentially what saved him, right? We had this whole conversation. So we need to basically pick up, in the end, the final redemption, where we left off, meaning with the correction of the world somewhere between the middle to the end of the 10th hour, right? Somewhere within that hour, that is where Adam sinned. We have to go back to the Garden of Eden to do a correction, to get to the point before the sin, and then only go up from there. That's what we've been doing for almost 6,000 years. Okay, so if we have that 10th hour, now if you count back, counting those numbers, right? So in other words, the 12th hour, the 11th hour, and somewhere within the 10th hour, if you plug in those numbers with the 83.3 years, you'll see that we're almost exactly on point with all the other timelines that we've been giving you from the Calling All Jews series. The Daniel's timeline, the resurrection timeline, all these things are coming together right now. It's just so beautiful and encouraging to see. But like we said, everything is of course subject to change as the hastening of the timeline. It's in our hands, right? So, good stuff, fun stuff. Let's get back. It was 83 1/3 years. Don't say you only get the net, what's on the text over here. You're getting a whole world. It was 83 1/3 years until Moses was born, when the magicians of Egypt, the Chaltumim, the magicians of Egypt told Pharaoh that a son will be born to the Israelites, and he will take them out of Egypt. In the book of Jasher, we read that Pharaoh had a dream, and he received Bilam's interpretation. Yes, Bilam was the grandson of Lavan. He's been alive for hundreds of years before Moses even came to the picture now. Anyway, and in the 130th year of Israel's going down to Egypt, exactly on almost exactly in the timeline, meaning that was on the 130th year, plus 80, 210. So in other words, this was the year that Moses was supposed to be born. Pharaoh dreamed that he was sitting upon his kingly throne and lifted up his eyes and saw an old man standing before him. And there were scales on the hands of the old man, such scales as are used by merchants. And the old man took the scales and hung them before Pharaoh. And the old man took all the elders of Egypt and the nobles and great men, and he tied them together and put them on one side of the scale. And he took a milk kid, in other words, a baby goat, right? And he put it on the other scale, and the kid preponderated over all. In other words, I guess he weighed more than that. And Pharaoh was astonished at this dreadful vision, why the kid should preponderate over all. And Pharaoh woke, and behold, it was a dream. And Pharaoh rose up early in the morning, and he called all his servants and related to them the dream. And the men were greatly afraid. And the king said to all his wise men, interpret, I pray you, the dream which I dreamed, that I may know it. And Bilam, the son of Beor, answered the king and said unto him, this means nothing else but a great evil that will spring up against Egypt in the latter days. For a son will be born to Israel who will destroy all of Egypt and its inhabitants, and bring forth the Israelites from Egypt with a mighty hand. We know who this is, right? Now I'm skipping a bit later on in the chapter. Now, therefore, O king, at this point, Bilam says, okay, listen, you got to go, go gather the other wise men. They were Jethro and they were Job, the ones we know. Anyway, now therefore, O king, hear my words, for this is the counsel which is counseled against them, by which you will prevail over them, and from which you should not depart. This is Bilam saying, right? Because Jethro was saying, do not mess with these people. He was going far back as Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and what happened along the way. Pharaoh was not happy with this, and he expelled Jethro. Jethro returned to Midian. Jethro would be the father-in-law of Moses. Job said, hey, whatever is good, whatever pleases the king, I'll do that. And then Bilam gave the suggestion about what's going on, and everything was good from there. Well, so they thought. If it please the king, let him order all the children which shall be born from this day forward to be thrown into the water. For by this can you wipe away their name, for none of them nor of their fathers were tried in this manner. What does this mean? Abraham, their father, was tried in fire. That didn't work out because he's still alive, right? What was it? Something else I forgot. It was something with the dust, with the sand. I think it was the Tower of Babel, if I'm not mistaken. I'm probably mistaken, but I don't exactly remember. But they haven't been tried by water, he's saying. Oh, yes, with Sodom and Gomorrah. So we got fire, we have earth overturning the earth. I think it was Sodom and Gomorrah. I forgot. Anyway, they haven't been tried by water. Water is their weakness. Throw them into the water. That's spiritually what will take them out, right? For by this can you wipe out their name, for none of them nor their fathers were tried in this manner. And the king heard the words of Bilam, and the thing pleased the king and the princes, and the king did according to the word of Bilam. Okay, so this is what the book of Jasher says, coming back to our text. And so he, Pharaoh, thought to himself, Havanit chakmalo, as it says, and said to throw all the male children in the Nile, and he, the Redeemer, will be thrown in there with them. In other words, throw all the males, we'll get them amongst there, no problem. As said in Exodus 1:22, and Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, every son who is born you shall cast into the Nile, and every daughter you shall allow to live, thereby moving any possibility of this Savior. For 3 1/3 years, they had been throwing them into the river Nile until Moses was born. So we see the timeline from Jasher and Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer is a little bit off, but that's neither here nor there because it's not a deciding factor. These are different opinions. After which the magicians told Pharaoh, behold, he has been born, but he is hidden from our eyes. In other words, they knew exactly when Moses was born, but they couldn't find him. The Radal notes that this decree came to pass while Yocheved was pregnant with Aaron, and the timeline makes sense because Aaron was 3 years older than Moses. In other words, the decree to throw the males into the water was when she was pregnant with Aaron. 3 1/3 years before, so 3 within that time she was pregnant with him. And Aaron was one of the children whose mother gave birth to him in the field. Pharaoh told them, so you guys remember what we discussed about this, that they would give birth in the field and then they would come back and then the ground would swallow them up and then the Egyptians would go into the field and they would thresh the field to try and cut all the children, but the ground actually took them in. And because the ground took them in, they couldn't reach them, and then they were receiving honey and milk from the rock. And then after a few years, the ground kind of brought them out, and you had thousands upon thousands of Hebrew children returning from the field to their homes, knowing exactly who their parents were. They had full consciousness. They were raised by angels. It was amazing stuff. So Aaron was one of these miracle children. Pharaoh told them, well, since he has been born, from here on out, do not throw the boys into the river, but rather increase the Israelites' workload to make their lives bitter, as said in Exodus 1:14. And they embittered their lives with hard labor, with clay and with bricks and with all kinds of labor in the fields, all their work that they had worked with them with back-breaking labor. Rabbi Netanel says, Moses' forefathers saw his image, and it was like an angel of the Lord. In other words, they beheld him when he was born, and they're like, it's like an angel, right? So think spiritually, not in the physical sense. Not that we know exactly what an angel of the Lord looks like anyway, right? Because like we said, if any of us today would actually behold any of God's angels in their true angelic form, it would kill you because you would surely die. Moses was a child born like other children, father and mother. Natural father and mother. However, when he emerged from his mother's womb, he was glowing with such an immense and intense brightening light, his parents had to shut all the windows and the doors, and his mom actually had to hide him under the ground, beneath the earth, inside their house, because his light was shining so bright. So you get this light of angel of the Lord, right? So from Jasher it says, so Amram took Yocheved his wife 3 years after he had driven her away, meaning from the birth of Aaron. Afterwards, okay, honey, we got to stop right now because they're killing the boys. And he came to her and she conceived. And at the end of 7 months, she brought forth a son. This is why the book of Jasher is a little bit off, because we know that Moses was born after 6 months. Here it says 7 months. After 7 months, she conceived, brought forth a son, and the whole house was filled with great light, as of the light of the sun and the moon at the time of their shining. Boom. And when the women saw the child that it was good and pleasing to the sight, when the woman saw the child good and pleasing to the sight, she hid it for 3 months in the inner room. So even this 3-month thing, this is exactly what's written in the Torah. Why 3 months? We're going to discuss that, but you'll see it makes more sense that he was born 6 months and not 7 months. So why did Amram first and foremost separate from his wife to begin with? Because the Egyptians were killing the boys. So to him, that made sense. However, in other words, why would we do this, right? But his daughter Miriam, who prophesied already at the age of 3, told her father 2 things. 1, you and mom need to get back together, because the son that you're going to have next, he's actually going to be the Redeemer of Israel. And 2, since you, Dad, you're the leader of the generation, Amram was Gdol Hador, the men follow you and do as you do. Now they've all separated from their wives, just as you have. Nobody's having babies. We are not being fruitful and multiplying, which is a command that God gave Adam and Eve, Noah and his kids, and obviously that's what we have to do. Though Pharaoh may have condemned the lives of the boys to death, because of your action now you're preventing both boys and girls from being born. In other words, you're killing everybody. So, you see, one of the many merits of Miriam is that she was responsible for the conception of Moses, and then she watched over him and everything. So Miriam she gets that zchut. So not only did Moses shine like an angel, but he would later become like an angel when he ascended Mount Sinai for 40 days. 40, and then halfway through, and then another 40, meaning 120 days. Days and nights without food and water. And that's the least impressive of all his, of the 40-day stint over there. He was a physical being who walked around in spiritual heaven. This has not been done by anybody. And that is why Moses is known as Ish HaElohim, the man of God. Ish HaElohim, man in his lower half, Elohim in his upper half. Moses. They circumcised him at 8 days, and he was called Yekutiel. Now, even though we know that Moses was already born circumcised, when this happens, because sometimes it does, even in our day, I personally know, my parents told me, my mom's like, that so-and-so, good friends of my parents, their kid, who I know, they just had a son and he was born circumcised. I'm like, whoa. I'm like, what? Like, who is this kid? Is this? She's like, no, actually, it does happen. It's very, very rare, but it does happen. So, yes, it does happen. In any case, even though you're born circumcised, you still have to perform the ritual. You still have to draw blood, because this is our rite of passage. So, Rabbi Shimon says they called him Tov, good, as said in Exodus 2:2. Vatahera isha vatalid ben, vatereoto, she beheld him, ki tov hu. The woman conceived, she bore a son, and when she saw him, it says that he was good, ki tov hu, he is good. Oh, good. So she called him good. And she, his mother, hid him beneath the floor of the house for 3 months, with the windows and the doors closed, right? So like we said, why 3 months? The Egyptians took an account of every pregnancy amongst the Jews. And they would go around the 9-month mark, knocking on the door, here you have a child. Right? Anyway, you get the point. And then they'd say, okay, are we going to kill it or not? Boy, girl. So, since Moses was born at 6 months instead of at 9 months, giving his mother 3 uninterrupted months with him, she could no longer keep him in her home because they would have found him. That's why it says in the Torah, and she hid him for 3 full months. Now it makes sense. Okay? As our text in Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer says, and after 3 months, she could no longer keep him hidden, so she placed him in an ark and tossed him in the river. Now, I think it's interesting that Moses did, after all, he did end up in the river, but it was in an ark. Now, I know the translation says basket, wicker basket, or whatever, but the Hebrew says ark, teva, the same word used with Noah's ark. And you're about to see several connections, but we'll discuss one in a minute. Why does our text say tossed into the river instead of placed on the riverbed? Because the magicians saw the Savior indeed being tossed into the river, assuming he had drowned. You see, they saw a lot, right? But they saw exactly what they needed to see, what God needed them to see. And then it says, and all this was known to the Holy One, blessed be he. Meaning, God had already planned for these divine appointments at the very time that Moses was floating down the river to take place. Remember, the remedy is always available before the blow. The answer always existed before the question. And this remedy, this answer, came in the form of the daughter of Pharaoh. And Pharaoh's daughter was inflicted with severe leprosy or sores, and she could not wash in warm water, so she descended to wash in the river. So even though this was the plan, right, for Israel to descend to Egypt, we could see exactly this had to happen for this to happen, and so on and so forth. This absolutely had to happen. It was not only was it not avoidable, it's good that this happened, right? So this was a plan for Israel to descend to Egypt and to be subjugated there for the sake of cleansing them so that they would be ready to receive the Torah as a mighty nation of God, as the mighty nation of God. This does not mean that God would just allow them to go on living if they were, the Egyptians, if they were just murdering his children. All of Egypt got shchin. Shchin is the 6th of the 10 plagues, right? It's like boils or sores. From Pharaoh and his household to all the servants, all of Egypt got this. Not Israel, the Egyptians. Our sages say that this was a different strand of leprosy. In most cases, warm or hot water may have been soothing, maybe soothing for your standard leprosy, right? But in this case, it was only cool water that would help for the sole purpose of this encounter right here. Wow. This is one opinion. Another opinion is that Pharaoh's daughter was disgusted by her father's actions of killing the Israelite children. In other words, her heart went out to Israel as it was, but that was the final straw. To the point that she decided that her fate is going to be as theirs, like Israel, right? It's almost like Moses, his heart went out to his people. What did he do? He went out to be among them because he started doing, some work for them, right? With them. Look who raised them, you see. So what do we call this? What do we call this? Your people are my people. Your God is my God. Where you go, I go. Where you die, I die. That's right. She was converting to the faith of the Hebrews, rebelling against her idolatrous father, the king of Egypt, the king of the world at the time, thereby putting her own life at risk. And the moment she dunked in the Nile for that purpose and arose from the water, she was now cleansed of the filth of idolatry and of Egypt. And that was also the moment, because of her actions, that she merited to find and hold Moses. And she saw a young child cry, and she stretched forth her hand and held him, and she was healed of her affliction. Look what Targum Yonatan says. And the word of the Lord sent forth a burning sore and inflammation of the flesh upon the land of Mitzrayim, of all of Egypt. God did this just for Pharaoh's daughter to, right? And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to refresh herself at the river, and her handmaids walked upon the river bank, saw the ark among the reeds, and put forth the arm and took it, and were immediately healed of the burning inflammation. And she opened and saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion upon him and said, this is one of the children of the Yehudai, the Jews, right? So not even when they touched Moses himself, but the ark that he was in. In Midrash Sota, in other words, they just touched the ark and they healed. In Midrash Sota, it says that they didn't even touch the basket. They didn't even touch the ark at first, but noticed when they just reached out towards it, as her hand was reaching out towards it, the leprosy, the boils started leaving her the closer she got to it. When she realized this, she quickly moved towards it, obviously. And it also says that Moses was crying. But if you meet, and it says it in the Torah, right? But if you read about Moses and any of the different midrashim and the deeper sources, he was fully aware. It said that when he came out of his mother's womb, he was walking around, and no, I know it's freaky stuff, right? But again, please suspend your disbelief when we are learning Torah, okay? We're learning about things that Moses did and that God did that are just crazier than the things that we're discussing here. So let's just go with it. This is one opinion. Actually, there's a lot of opinions. But in any case, Moses popped out because he was one of the highest souls ever created. He popped out of his mom. He's like, hey, how you guys doing? And he was shining with light, and he started speaking to them. And he was prophesying, and this was Moses, right? He was fully aware, even though he was a child. So what is going on over here that he's crying? Moses wasn't crying. So, like we said, you read some of the deeper sources, you'll understand that this isn't exactly how it would go down. He wasn't crying in the basket, but God sent the angel Gabriel to make him cry in order to soften the hearts of the women so they would have compassion over the child. That's it, just for that reason. In another case, it's they made him cry so they would notice the basket and turn there because they heard, right? All these things are different ways to look at the same story. She beheld his light and the power of healing he possessed when she said, this child is a tzaddik. He is a righteous man, or he is righteous, a righteous child. And he shall live, directly opposing her father's decree. An Israelite child, male child, needs to be killed. No, righteous, live. She loved him immediately as if he were her own. And so it says, anyone who sustains one life from Israel, it is as if he sustained an entire world. And anyone who deprives one life from Israel, it is as if he destroyed an entire world. Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer is using this example right here, what I just read to you right now, specifically in this case, since Moses was the equivalent of the Shishim Ribo, of the 600,000 Israelite males from ages 20 and up. In other words, he was equal to all of Israel. When God was going to destroy Israel and start over with Moses, he placed his fate with that of Israel, thereby saving them, and by extension, the world. And as we've learned, the reason the world even exists is for the sake of Israel. And the reason Israel exists is for the sake of receiving God's Torah, which Moses was chosen to bring to the world. And the reason God brought the Torah to the world is for the sake of elevating everything and turning darkness into light, bringing us back to the Garden of Eden before the sin. Why was Moses chosen? You'll love this. This incarnation of Moses is the fifth incarnation of Moses. I learned this shortly, a few months ago. I always thought it was 3, but then I read 2 more in between. So I was very impressed. Okay. So this incarnation of Moses is the 5th and final one. Why? Because he perfected his physical being. We're even supposed to perfect our physical being. In other words, if there's any blemish in us, this is why we decay and we return to earth. Moses' body never decayed because his soul didn't want to leave his body. It was invited. God said, "You come, you with me beneath my throne," and it's like, no, I'm good in this guy's body. Look how he perfected his body. And we gave this in, what was the teaching? It was Vezot HaBracha, okay, in the Torah portion teachings, Vezot HaBracha. This was I give the teaching in the shul that I grew up in. So watch that one. It's a fun teaching and is about basically the last hour of Moses' life. In any case, so let's go through his reincarnations. The first incarnation, the first time that the spark of the soul of Moses came to the world, was in the very first child born, and that is Abel, not Cain. Cain is the literal son of Satan and Eve. Okay, if you read deeper about this, Adam and Eve bore Abel. Abel was actually the first natural born child in the world, in the history of the world. So we've discussed about Cain, right? Abel was also allowed to be killed. Why? Because he looked into the Shekhinah. When he gave the Korbanot, he said he looked into the Shekhinah. There was a little pride in there. That's why he was taken out. Okay? The second incarnation was the second son of Adam and Eve after Adam had done full tshuva. For 130 years, it said that he was sitting in the Gihon spring, where we have today. It's down by the bottom of the city of David. You could go dunking there if you want. So he was sitting there for 130 years doing tshuva for everything that had transpired before in the Garden of Eden. He was also mourning Cain killing Abel and so on and so forth. And then he came back, righteous as he was, to his wife, and they bore Seth. And that was the second incarnation of Moses. And then it said that Adam bore Seth after his likeness and image. Likeness and image, in other words, he looked exactly like his father, both in appearance and both in his good deeds as well. So he's also a tzaddik. The third incarnation was Noah, who, like Moses, was born circumcised, and it was foretold of him that humanity would continue through him. Noah was prophesied, even in all the names going down, that he would give rest to the earth. However, certain things happened after the flood and everything. Noah has been dubbed the foolish or drunk shepherd. The fourth incarnation was the son of Noah, Shem. When Noah kind of screwed up after the whole thing with the vine debacle, the spark left him and went to his son, Shem, who became the first high priest in the world to God. See, if you actually learn what happened in the ark, you'll see that when Noah was feeding all the animals, he was a little bit late feeding the lions, and the lions smacked him, and he made Noah lame. And as we know, if any priest, according to the line of Aaron, any priest that has a slight blemish or is lame, who is not physically perfect, it is not appropriate for someone who is blemished to give a perfect offering to God. You can't do it. And that's why it wasn't Noah who gave, as it says, the sacrifices to God upon the altar. Not the altar on Mount Ararat, the altar on Temple Mount. That's where they gave that first altar. And it wasn't Noah who did it because he couldn't do it. And so he taught his son Shem how to do it. So Shem was actually the first and only man to give offerings to God, knowing the proper way to do it, instructed by Noah, his father. And guess what? Who is Shem? Shem is Melchizedek. They are the same person. And Melchizedek, the king of Salem, meaning the king of Jerusalem, brought out bread and wine, and he was a priest to the Most High God. Kohen La'el Elyon. We're just talking about a few short 100 years after the flood, and everyone knew this guy, what he came from before the flood. He's the son of Noah, and he is now the priest to the Most High God. This is his job. This is what he's doing. He was the only one. Okay? So he was the only high priest to the Most High God. And then the fifth and final incarnation is the Moses we read about in Exodus, the Moses that we're discussing, the Moses we have come to know and love. That is why Moses is also known as V'ha'ish Moshe. He's called Ha'ish Moshe. Why Ha'ish? Hey is 5. The letter Hey, Gematria, numerical value 5. 5, the fifth man, Moses. You get it? The fifth incarnation, Ha'ish Moshe. Okay? The fifth Ish is Moses. Moses corrected Abel's error by hiding his face from the Shekhinah by the burning bush, right? He said he turned his head and hid his face, showing how humble he was. He already did a tikkun for Abel. Moses corrected Noah's error by praying for the world, meaning for Israel, therefore the world, before God would destroy it and not after, right? That's what he did. That's why Moses essentially saved Israel, saved the world. Noah saved himself and his family. If he would have done that before, God said, dude, I would have changed the entire decree, but you didn't. Moses is also known as the faithful shepherd, Haroeh HaNe'eman. God says, there is no more faithful person in all of my house than this guy right here. Okay? So Noah was known as the drunken or foolish shepherd. Moses corrected that by being called the faithful shepherd. Moses corrected Shem's error by giving all glory to God first and foremost, where Shem, Melchizedek, fell short. When he said, and he blessed him and said, blessed be Abram to the Most High God, who possesses heaven and the earth. So first he blessed Abram before he blessed God. That is when, as we discussed, that was the moment that the priesthood of Melchizedek was taken from Shem, and now Abraham became Melchizedek, who then gave it to Isaac and Jacob, and so on and so forth. You see, Melchizedek is a title. Malki Tzedek, Malki, my king, Tzedek is righteousness. That's only God. So this is what happened over there. And as we have also discussed, Moses was supposed to be the high priest, but that whole back and forth where he says, nah, I don't want to go, I can't speak, I'm a man I got a stutter, I got the arel sfatayim, of uncircumcised lips, I can't do this. Shlach na beyadcha tishlach, send who you will send. You got Pinchas who's about to come out over there. We know he's going to be Elijah, he's going to live forever. Send him, he's great. Why don't you send that guy? God's like, okay, all right, guess what? You were supposed to be the high priest, but now your brother is going to be the high priest. He's coming here. No, he's very happy to see you. And that's why, and he didn't tell Moses at that point, right? When did he tell Moses that he's not going to be the high priest? Because Moses really thought he would be the high priest. When he said, and your brother Aaron's the high priest. That was another test for Moses to see if you like if he would, oh man, but he was genuinely happy for him. So in other words, there was perfect peace between the brothers, right? And also, again, so you know this, if there are any Jews listening and you have any idea what I'm talking about right now, in the Sfirot, especially the Ushpizin and everything, you have Moses sitting on the Sfirah of Netzach, which is on the right. And Aaron is Hod on the left, but this is untrue. In the spiritual realm, yes, because the right side, that is the side of the priesthood, right? The right is Abraham. It's the side of mercy and grace. Aaron, peace, atonement, mercy, and grace. The colors are white. The colors are blue. The colors on the left is the colors of judgment, red and crimson. Isaac, judgment, right? Hod, which is, what is Hod? Hod is majesty. And so Moses is actually the Sphira of Hod, as said in the 5 books of Moses, when God told Moses, take from your Hod and give it to Joshua. Why did this happen? Because their roles switched, but spiritually speaking, Moses is actually the high priest. And there's a hint in that in the word Michael, as in the high priest of Israel, the spiritual high priest of Israel. That is Michael, the archangel, who says, just like Israel, the high priest, gives the offerings to God, Michael, the archangel, offers the souls of Israel before God when the high priest down here does it. And where is he? He's on the right. Gabriel, judgment, on the left. See how that works? So, in the name Michael, Mem Kaf Aleph Lamed, you spell Michael, Mem Moshe Kaf Kohen, El Aleph Aharon Lamed Levi, Moses the priest, Aaron the Levite. So in the future, when we are more spiritual than physical, that will be reversed. Okay, no love lost between the brothers over here. Everything is good. Anyway. So this is just going to basically show you, all this is to show you Moses' greatness. And this is, of course, for a reason. This is why we're going through all this. And we discussed that whoever saves the life of Israel saves an entire world. So look at what our text says. This is why you got this whole thing. Therefore, the daughter of Pharaoh merited to cleave beneath the wings of the Shekhinah, and she is called the daughter of Hamakom. The space, the presence, the daughter of the presence, also known as Bat, the daughter of Yah, Bithiah. So you see, Moses had 10 names given to him by his father, his mother, the elders, the angels, and even by God himself. Moses had 10 different names, but he was called Moses because that is the name that Bithiah gave him. God said, you risked your life and went against your earthly father to save the savior of my people. Now I am your father. Look at me. I am your father now. All right. I am your father, and you shall be known to all as my daughter, Bithiah. It was because she left her father and joined Israel when they were at their lowest point that her sincerity merited her to save Moses. You don't just get to save Moses. You need to merit to save Moses. Moses is equal Israel is equal the world. You see? She just saved the world. She had to merit. She had to get the merit to be able to do this. How? By everything we just said that she did. So she merited to save Moses, thereby saving Israel, thereby saving the world. She was one of only 10 people who never died, but entered alive into the Garden of Eden as well. Now, we don't know much about her, but we do know much about Moses. And God chose her to care for him. And so that really might be all we need to know. And that is today's class. So I hope you enjoyed it. As always, thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful rest of the week and have a Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye.